This podcast is part of the Frederick Podcast Network. Learn more at listenfrederick.com.
That's number one. You kind of reset me.
Painful, tender to the touch. May also
Same shoulder length, and the other.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Real Health Podcast. But it's not just another episode, is it?
It isn't.
This is episode number 100.
Woo!
And so you'll notice we're not in the office today. We are actually on set at Key103 with Manning Media. And we are recording in a professional studio, which is pretty cool. As you guys know, Manning Media is who started the Frederick Podcast Network, which is what brings us to you. And we can be found on listenfrederick.com. The Real Health Podcast with Brandy and Amir. This is Brandy Rashidian. I am Dr. Amir Rashidian, a chiropractor. And our podcast is all about taking the latest information about health and wellness, bringing it to you, explaining it, giving you our perspective from a non-drug, non-surgical perspective. And our hope, our wish, our purpose is that we can help you feel better, get stronger, live longer, and feel younger. So since this is episode number 100,
Yeah.
how have you felt about the last 99 episodes? Although, 99 was pretty amazing. But what about the other 98?
Yeah. Hopefully you guys had as much fun on with 99 as we did. I think if you haven't watched it, I encourage you to go back because it was a blast. We actually included our entire team with that one. So, and brought back a fan favorite.
That's right. Devin
Yep.
Brady.
So I definitely encourage you to go watch that if you haven't. But,
His episode actually did really well.
yeah.
Devin's episode. He talked about his bodybuilding regimen and routine, and everyone was amazed that he wakes up at 3 a.m. every single morning, regardless of Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
I'm amazed too. I will not do that.
Oh, yeah, it's a discipline. His body shows it.
Yeah,
That's
well,
pretty good.
yeah, I will never have guns like that, even if I do wake up at 3. So I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
We call those grandma arms.
That's mine or his. I don't think we call it his grandma arms.
Well, I'm going back to the episode with Blake and Mark,
Oh, yes.
where Mark said his grandma had really strong arms.
Yeah, which is
And
pretty amazing.
He was hoping he would have the same genes, although, Blake and Mark look pretty good too.
Yeah, they look amazing. So what are some of your other favorite episodes? I mean, 99, that's a lot to go back through to find your favorites. So what are some of the ones that really stood out?
Personally, I enjoyed talking about the placebo and how we got into a little discussion about whether it's a drug or not. And I firmly believe a placebo is a drug. So anyways, I thought that was good. Either way, we both agree that it's valuable and it
100%.
should be utilized by practitioners. I also really liked when we did the article on superagers and how some people over the age of 80 maintain their memory and mental cognition is perfect, while others who age to that length, that far, lose their mind, and what the distinction was. And I was blown away at what they actually found out.
Well, recap it for us.
All right. So they looked at whether it's do they abstain from alcohol, and that wasn't the answer. Are they the ones that don't smoke or don't take drugs, or do they eat really healthy? Do they exercise? None of those was the factor when it came to keeping your mind sharp over the age of 80. The one commonality was they had really good relationships. They had good friends, they had good family, they had good relationships with their family members, and their mind stayed sharp.
And, I think we can see the biggest example in the opposite direction of that was during COVID. When people were isolated, when they didn't have the opportunity to be in community as we were used to, and I think as we're created to be. And so, we see from that time frame just an escalation in depression, anxiety, people spending more time on electronics, maybe unnecessarily.
Yeah.
A lot of us
That's
were
when
pushed
Zoom
into
stock
that.
went through the roof.
No kidding.
And then it came right back down.
Yes. So I agree. That was a really fun one. I really, really loved the one we did on frequencies. That was really fun because that was a topic I had really been wanting to dive into. Mm-hmm. And then I laughed because we did that months ago, right? And then just this last week, I had some friends going, I think my dear friend, I don't think she listens to our podcast, which is really funny. It's okay. I love you anyway. And she's like, I heard this great podcast on music and frequencies and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, there's another one. One of my favorite podcasters just did one a week or so ago on music and frequencies and how it impacts the body and some of the history of how that was changed. And I was like, there's another great one a few months back that kind of dove into the science of it a little bit more. The one she was listening to was a little bit more on the spiritual aspect, but I kind of teased her a little bit on that. But that was one of my favorites.
Yeah.
So I think we could go back and expand on that even more.
We've certainly come a long way. Real Health Podcast started out because we like to read all the latest information anyways. Mm-hmm. A lot of times we'll read things, we'll sit down and discuss it, and we end up having great conversations. So one day we just said, why don't we turn on the camera and record some of this?
And what's funny is many probably don't know this, but our first several podcasts were just audio, and we actually did those in this kind of setting.
Yeah.
So, our first few we weren't recorded video wise, but
it aired on a Saturday morning at 8 a.m. It was a 30-minute spot on the radio.
Yeah. So, I think it's neat that we've kind of come full circle, and on our 100th episode here, we are sitting back in a radio station, but we have Sean with us now, which is awesome. So I tease Sean a little bit because he is literally like on our side here. He's like around the side. So I'm like, ooh, be careful, because I might tell you to pop your head in.
Usually he's right over there where you guys are. He's there. But
so now I don't know where to look.
Yeah, he's over here.
I'm like, do I look there? Do I look at Sean? Do I look at you? So if I don't look at you guys, I'm sorry. It's not deliberate. I just don't know where I am.
I think a lot of people watch the episode just because of Sean.
Oh, for sure.
They want to hear the latest on Sean.
Yes.
So, anyways, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, I was looking and trying to think of what a really cool topic would be. And, for us, kids' health is so important, as it is for every parent. I mean, there's no parent out there, I don't believe, that would feel like the health of their child is not important.
I believe the children are the future. Teach them well.
And let them lead the way. Maybe we can intro that song or outro that song. I don't know. Okay, moving on. So I thought today it might be kind of fun to talk a little bit about the youth mental health surge. And so talking a little bit about youth mental health, something new that's popping up in social media on TikTok and Instagram specifically is something called sober curiosity, which made me a little curious. And then kind of the youth wellness revolution, like how things are changing, for like Generation Z versus what's the next one? Generation Alpha.
I never even knew there was a Generation Alpha.
Oh.
These generations are coming by too quick.
Yeah, it does feel that way, doesn't
like
it?
One of our kids is a Gen Z and the other two are Gen Alpha.
Yeah, and one's like right on the border.
We have two kids in different generations.
I know.
I thought a generation was like 100 years,
Yeah. Well, to my surprise as well.
How long was the baby boomer generation? Isn't it like 40 years?
I don't know, because this is like less than 20 years.
Yeah, these are a lot fast. Like millennials, was only like what, 10 years? Less than 10 years.
I have to look up because we got busy.
Gen
talking.
X was longer. That's us, right? We're Gen X.
Well, as we get to talking, I'll see if I can look those up and see what those date ranges were, because it's odd to me too. So.
Yeah, I mean, the Gen X, what is it? Gen Z hasn't had a chance to have kids yet, and there's another generation. I always thought the next generation were the kids of the first generation, because like Gen X were the kids of the baby boomers.
Right. Yeah, it's not like that anymore.
Yeah.
So here we are. So let's talk a little bit about the youth mental health surge. So, what do you think is going on right now with mental health with our youth? What would you say I know it's hard because we've both done research, but like in everything that we've talked about over the past, 99 episodes, and then what we've researched today, what do you think is one of the biggest or few biggest things that kids are having to deal with?
It's so hard to say, because I look back, when I was a kid over 40 years ago, I had mental health issues, I thought, but I thought everyone did. I don't know if we didn't talk about it as much, and that's why now it's more prevalent. I don't know how much there were pressures when we were kids, and there are pressures today. There are different types of pressures and different sources of those pressures.
Right.
But there are pressures, and there's always been pressure. So growing up, we had nothing. We came from Iran with $500 and 2 suitcases because the airlines lost our 3rd suitcase.
Right.
And just a little word to the wise, don't put all your pants in one suitcase and shirts in the other suitcase. Because I lost the pants suitcase. I had shirts, but I had no pants.
Yeah. That doesn't go well in the U.S.
In Iran either.
Probably most countries like you to
It's a little worse
pants.
in Iran, yeah. So in Iran, you can't even wear short sleeve or short shorts. But yeah, we had nothing. And then, so I have to go to school, and the Iranian culture, the pressure is you have to either become a doctor, a lawyer, or I don't know, and a high-level engineer. You have to become something special, which means you better go to college, you better go to grad school, and you better graduate top of your class. And growing up, according to my mother, there's no such thing as a B. It's an A or an F. If you don't get an A, you failed. And so that was pressure. And if you don't get straight A's, I was not athletic. Believe it or not.
I do not believe it.
I didn't always look this great.
He is now.
Depends on your definition of athletic.
Well, just because you had one tough basketball game, that's...
Hey, I'm the only one who didn't get injured.
Okay.
That was a violent basketball game.
That was a violent family basketball
We'll have to
game.
bring you footage of that sometime. So there's no such thing as an athletic scholarship on my plate.
Right.
It's academics.
Right.
And so every day I'm thinking, oh no, if my grade started to slip out of an A, I was scared. I'd go to my teachers. I'd say, listen, I have no money. I need to get a scholarship to go to college.
Right.
How do I get an A in your class? That was a lot of pressure. And then if I got a less than a perfect grade on a test, I was scared to show my mother. I was afraid that this ruined my life. I got to be on my report card.
Right.
So that was the pressure I was under. And yeah, I thought about it in my life, but I never seriously. But I was like, man, that might be a good option.
Right. Which it never is.
And of course not. And so I don't know if there's more or just different pressure.
Well, it's probably different. Like I would say mine was a little bit different because we also didn't have money either, right? My father struggled to hold down jobs, and then with my mom's passing, we ended up being raised by my grandparents, a totally different generation. They didn't talk about stuff. You didn't talk about sex. You didn't talk about dating. You didn't talk about, mental illness. You didn't talk about stuff. You quietly dealt with it and you moved through life, right? So for them, I'm sure that was really a struggle because a very different generation, like I needed to talk about those kinds of things. And that just wasn't a huge opportunity in our family. And then there wasn't the pressure of school, right? You were like, if you graduated, okay, from high school. If you ended up going to community college, okay. Like it was not a conversation. It wasn't, you need to get good grades and so you can graduate, so you can go to college and get a good job.
You didn't have someone pushing you or
there was no one
motivating
pushing
you.
Right. So you, at that juncture, you either look at what you were raised with and you either go, there's nothing more, or you go, I don't want that. Well, thank goodness I didn't fall into the category of complacency that goes, there's nothing more than this. I was like, there's got to be something more than this, which is what motivated me to do different things than, what other family members did. And I only have like one other family member who literally did the same thing. Do you know what I mean? While she stayed there, she put herself through, was raising multiple children, putting herself through night school and working during the day so she could get her nursing degree.
You also had a lot of, in your family, you had a lot of alcoholism.
Yeah, a lot of addiction and whatnot. So yeah, on both sides, matter of fact. So, there's pressure in not having someone directing you, I think. And that's huge.
I mean, I remember when we would just go visit Kansas and visit, your old
I didn't
stomping
even let you
grounds.
go before we got married.
But I only met one of your grandmas.
Not the one that raised me either.
I wasn't allowed to meet the other one until we got married. But it was interesting because a lot of people every day talked about drinking.
Yeah.
That was a thing. Like,
Yeah.
hey, where are we going to drink tonight?
Well, in my
And what are we
teenage
gonna
years,
drink tonight?
that was very prevalent. Like, as soon as you could figure out how to either steal cigarettes and alcohol from, an adult family member or a somewhat adult family member, or you were like, it was everybody smoked, everybody drank. And I mean, everybody, I'll say the vast majority of the people that were in our socioeconomic, situation. I mean, even some of the kids who were from families who had more money, they were still drinking. Like, it was just, that was what people did in
Right.
my area. It may have been different in different parts of the country, but I'll say there definitely was not nearly as many healthy activities for teens where I grew up versus where other people may have been from. So,
Yeah. So what's going on today in the youth?
well, what the stats are saying is that depression and anxiety in our youth have doubled over the past 10 years, which is really, really scary. So a kid is right now, I know I can't say the word, but taking your own life is now the second leading cause of death for people ranging in the ages of 15 to 24.
Wow.
I think that's astronomical. Do you know what I mean? That's like crazy. I wish I had had time to go back and see what it was in the days where we were growing up and we were those ages, but I know it was not that high. They say that 1 in 3 teen girls seriously considers it in the recent CDC data from 2023. So what are some of the things that have changed or some of the things that are different now than when we were kids? Well, number one, social media.
Right. And I know the stats show, especially this one article, this was Washington Post, right? It says even some teens say social media is hurting their mental health, is the title of the article. It came out just a couple days ago. And it says parents are more worried about social media than teenagers.
Yeah, but
The teens now, some of them are
Yeah.
starting to say, well, maybe it does have a factor, but they
I mean,
did-
that's different than 2 or 3 years ago, though.
But there's
Teens weren't
still
even saying
too
that.
much denial that there's a lot of pressures that come from social media
Yeah.
and that whole comparison game.
Right.
'Cause you didn't know what you're.
Sean's shaking his head. Yes, he agrees.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. There's the big comparison game, right, which is really defined by our culture. And it's really defined by marketing, by these big companies that want kids to utilize products that they have no business utilizing. How many articles have we read
Yeah,
about?
we did a whole thing about skincare and how teenagers
Yeah.
are taking old age skin
my gosh.
remedies and it's ruining their skin.
Yeah. So there's that. There's, people, what do you call it? I almost said huffing, but that's not it. Vaping. I think huffing was back in our day. You did like Cool Whip.
I've never heard of that.
Oh, yeah, that was really big. So
You did Cool Whip.
I did not.
Like
but
KFC
people
does
would
chicken
take,
right? You did Cool Whip?
Well, we didn't do it right. I
Oh,
didn't.
you
I was not a huffer. But that is one thing they would take. You would take a can like that, get rid of all the
Don't
products.
teach them anything.
Okay. Not teaching. Sorry. So anyway, you can bleep that out. We don't need any recipes.
But if they lived in Kansas or they're old enough, they know.
They
and
already
if
know.
they don't know, they don't need to know.
Yes,
I
100%.
certainly don't want to know.
But so there are things like that, that I think play a huge role. Society and these big marketers, they know that there's money to be made because kids now have, how many kids have their own credit cards really young, have their own phones and access to mom and dad's wallet, and they can go on and purchase. We've talked to friends whose kids like went on and bought themselves very expensive basketball shoes or whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, for me, social media was a phone with a long cord.
Right.
That was my social media.
Yeah.
Right, and so I would go into my parents' bedroom and use their phone because it was upstairs.
Oh, yeah.
There was a phone in their bedroom. There was a phone in the kitchen. That was it. We
That
had
was it.
Two phones. The kitchen one had a long cord, but you still don't get privacy. So I would go upstairs and call my friends. But then someone downstairs could pick up the phone and listen to your conversation.
100%. We had one. My grandma's phone was yellow. It was a big yellow phone, and it was a rotary dial phone as well. And the receiver cord had a really long cord, and then the small clear cord that went from the wall to the phone was extra long too. So not that I'm condoning this either, but at night when grandma and grandpa would fall asleep, we would take the phone into the closet And we would sit there and we would talk quietly, which is funny because the closet was closer to their room. But the biggest problem was when we'd go to do the rotary dial,
the other phone would...
the phone would click
Yeah.
because they had gotten like one of the new cordless phones. And that thing would click with every... So God forbid there was like a 9 or multiple 9s in the number. You were like, they were sure to wake up. So that's really funny. It reminded me of when we were getting our first home phone because the grandmas are home a lot with our kids. You know that. They don't know that. Are home a lot with our kids, and they were struggling to answer their phones. It was driving me nuts. So I'm like, that's it. I'm going to get a home phone so that the boys can answer the phone. And we're the only ones that had the number. And so when I told Naveed that we were getting a home phone, he goes, oh, is it one of those phones with a face? And it took me like 5 minutes to be like, what is he talking about? I go, a face. He goes, yeah, you know, the one with a face and you pick it up like this. And I'm like, oh, I don't know why you think I'm so old. No, that is not what it is. I said, it actually looks just like a cell phone. It's a little bit larger. It doesn't have a cord. Because he asked, will it have a really long cord so we can not like stand right by the phone?
Well, so my oldest and I watch a lot of 80s movies. So that's where he sees that stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, he was like, this was years ago.
Yeah.
This was before we were letting him watch 80s movies.
Really?
Yeah.
Even before Karate Kid, huh?
Yeah, it might have been around the same time.
He's 15 now, so.
Yeah. So I just think that's hilarious.
So, but you wonder when it comes to social media, is it the fact that, because even when we were using the phone, there was another human on the other side.
Right.
But now when they're using their phone, there's no human, there's no voice. If it's a voice, it's recorded, you know, it's a video, it's a picture, it's an image.
Because kids don't really talk to each other over the phone.
So is it the actual social media, or is it the lack of actual human interaction that's causing an increase in mental health?
Well, I think it's probably a combination because we know that that physiologically, all of that screen time, that blue light activity, that affects our health in a negative way.
Sure.
Right? So I think that's part of it. All of our, Wi-Fi, all of those EMF signals are impacting our body negatively, and our kids are around it nonstop, right? They spend all day under fluorescent lights, which are horrible for their health. They're not moving. Most of them aren't eating well. And then they come home, mom and dad might still be at work, so they jump right on to their gaming systems, their phones, whatever the case may be. There's not a lot of one-on-one interaction. So if they are, they're through headphones, and they're talking, playing on a game with someone, but they don't really talk on the phone. Naveed has just kind of gotten into having good friends of the opposite gender. And so and the big blessing is that, number one, very nice girl. Number two, he's actually talking on the phone. Mm-hmm. It's not all of this just texting stuff, because you can't get a real feel of who someone is.
That's the other thing. When we talked on the phone, we paid per minute.
Oh, yeah.
So if the phone bill came... When the phone bill came, they knew exactly what number you dialed and how many minutes you spoke, and then you were in trouble. So once a month, you're getting yelled at because you talked. And if it was like in the next zip code or next area code, then you paid a whole lot more per minute, and the phone bill would go
You
up.
had your phone bill covered a lot longer than I did. I did not ever have a cell phone until I was...
No, this was the landline.
Oh,
it was
the landline.
Landline did.
I only talked to people locally.
Every phone bill had every number you called, what time you called. Phone bills were pretty accurate back then.
We just didn't have charges on those the local
I didn't get my
calls.
first cell phone until I was in chiropractic school. I was 24 years old was my first cell phone.
And right now, if any kids were watching this, they'd all go, what? Not having it till they're 24.
And that thing didn't do anything except
make phone calls.
Make phone calls.
And that was it.
Yeah. And even then, the first minute was free. Mm-hmm. So it was designed at 50 seconds, you'd hear a little ding. As soon as you'd hear the ding, you hang up. And then the other person knew. They would call you back. At 50 seconds, you hang up again, and then you call them. And then you go back and forth if you had to talk longer.
What a long conversation that ended up being.
In the old days, my dad had a cell phone, and it was like $10 a minute to talk on that thing.
Yeah.
And it was a brick.
Yeah, I remember that. My grandmother had
with an
daycare.
Antenna that you pull up.
Oh, yeah. My grandma had a daycare, and one of the people that she took care of, they had one of the first car phones. It was something.
It's probably in
So,
the Museum of American History now.
we thought it was just amazing. Now, I remember the beeper days, the pagers.
Yeah.
And we had words that you could make with the numbers and stuff like that. And then we had to, if somebody paged you and you weren't home, you literally stopped at a payphone. Yes,
Took out a
that's what
dime.
they were there for.
You put a dime in a payphone.
Or a quarter. Got up
you're
to a
younger
quarter.
than me. That's right.
And then you had to make a phone call. So God forbid you didn't have a quarter, and then it was a collect call home.
That's right.
And then when they said, "Who is this?" "I'm going to be late for dinner." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or I'm stuck in traffic, or I ran
Well,
out of
the
gas.
operator would ask you. Operator would say, "Who may I say is calling?"
Right, but it was
And
automated.
you'd say,
for me.
"Tell them." Oh, okay.
No, it was
So-
automated for me. And then when that recording came on, it recorded your name, but instead of the name, you gave the message really fast.
Yeah.
And then the other line would pick up and they'd say, "This is a collect call from," and then
gonna
it would
be
say,
late.
"I'm going to be late for dinner." And, "will you accept?" "No." So that's how it went.
Will you accept the charges? Hilarious.
Very.
Well, speaking of taking your own life, you know the story of Kevin Hines. So apparently in September of the year 2000, Kevin Hines was, I'm guessing he was around 19 or 20 years old. He had been battling mental health for a few years, and he said goodbye to his father and headed out to the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco to jump. And everyone needs to listen to his story. He's told his story on multiple platforms. He has his own social media, and he's an advocate for mental health. But the story is incredible, and I actually watched him get interviewed with our oldest. He was, I believe, only 12 or 13 at the time.
Yeah.
And I wanted him to know what this is, what this type of mental pain,
Right.
which Kevin Hines says it's not mental illness, it's brain disease.
Yeah.
And he says it's brain pain. So he was diagnosed with bipolar, manic depressive disorder. And he would hear thoughts, when he was depressive, he would hear thoughts that, you have to die. And he said, I kept repeating that over and over until I believed it. And I didn't want to die, but I thought I had to die. And he says the majority of people who attempt to take their life, it's the same thing. They don't want to,
Of course.
but they feel like they have to. They feel like there's no other option, and so they do it. And so this young man, Kevin, he says goodbye to his father. He kisses his father. He says, I'll see you tonight, knowing he wasn't going to come home. And his father said, be careful. Because he knew that he was.
If you get teary-eyed, I'm going to get teary-eyed. So
Kevin gets on a bus to go to Golden Gate Bridge. And he said, on this bus, this is the part that breaks my heart. He said, on this bus, he's crying.
yeah.
Tears are pouring down his face, and he's talking to himself. Now, there's at least 50 people on this bus with a bus driver. He's sitting in the very, very back, and he's bawling, like ugly crying. And he keeps saying, I don't want to die. Stop, I don't want to die. And not a single person said anything to him. One guy pointed to him and said, what's wrong with that guy? And so the bus stops at the Golden Gate Bridge, and everybody gets off. He's still back there because he's scared. He doesn't want to go because he knows when he gets off that bus, he has to do what he doesn't want to do. And he's just crying back there. The bus driver says, you better get off this bus, pal. Final stop. He said he walked up to the front of the bus, looked the bus driver in the eyes, tears still pouring down his face. And he got off the bus. He said, if one person talked to me and asked me how I was doing,
Right.
or showed that they cared, he said, I realized no one cared. He said, one person that cared about me, I would not have jumped. And then he goes to the railing, and he's looking down at the water. He's talking to the water out loud.
Right.
No one's acknowledged. This is a busy place. No one's
Right.
acknowledged him. A woman comes up to him and says, "Will you take my picture, please?" He's got snot coming down his nose, tears. He goes, "Sure." He said, on the inside, I laughed because I go, no one cares. So she posed like 4 or 5 different poses, and he took her picture and gave her the camera, and she walked off.
So sad.
And when she walked off, he jumped. He said the millisecond he let go of the railing, he regretted it. He said, and everyone who does that regrets it. Instantly, they go, why did I do that? I shouldn't have. He said when you hit the water at that speed, because it's a pretty long, very few people survive that jump.
Right.
He said the impact of the water shattered his T12, L1, and L2 vertebrae, and he couldn't move his legs. And
Which means you can't really swim.
and he got sucked down into the water really, really deep. And he the whole time he said he called out to God. He said, "God, help me! I don't want to die." And he used his arms to come up. And when he did, he didn't have the strength, so he went back down.
Right.
And then he felt this thing under him, and he said, "It's got to be a shark." He goes, "A shark is going to eat me." This has got to be the worst.
To make matters worse.
He said, "This has got to be the worst death ever." And he punched it, and it didn't go away. And then he noticed it would swim in circles and hit him under the feet, hit him under the back, and hit him under the shoulders. And then it kept going back and forth, and it kept pushing him up. And that thing, whatever it was, held him up so he could breathe until Coast Guard came. The story is incredible because he said later he's doing a public appearance, and a woman went up to him and said, "I was 2 feet from you when you jumped.
Oh my gosh.
It's been killing me inside because I never knew if you survived, and I wonder if you survived." And by the way, it wasn't a shark, it was a sea lion. So
Grace of God, people.
God sent the sea lion to push him up, to hold him up so he wouldn't drown. And then he said a woman was driving by on the Golden Gate Bridge and saw him jump. She happened to have a friend in the Coast Guard and called his cell phone and said, "Someone just jumped, and this is where it was." The Coast Guard service person said, "I'm nearby. What are the chances?" And he came over and picked him up because the water was so cold it would have caused hypothermia.
Right.
Pulled him up, and anyways, and there happened to be that day, and he's not there every day. That day there was a spine surgeon there who knew how to do a specific surgery to give power back to his legs so he wouldn't be paralyzed. And that surgery has not been done since that day.
Wow.
By that person. So all of these are miracles.
100%.
And you know, how many lives is he saving by telling a story
my
like
gosh.
this?
So
but the
many.
reason I wanted our son to hear this story, and I want to watch it and listen to it again with our other 2 sons,
Yeah, absolutely.
is because I told him, I said, maybe one day you'll be on a bus and there'll be a kid in the back crying,
right.
and no one will act like they care, but you will walk up.
That's powerful. Yep.
You'll walk up, you'll ask him how he's doing, and you'll tell him you care. You say, "I care about you because you're a human. And what's more important to God than people?"
Yep.
And when you have this kind of mental pain, he said the 3 F's keep him alive. Because he said today it's been 20 years, it's been 25 years since he jumped. He said every day he has the same voices telling him to do the same thing. And he talked about, different therapies and things he does, exercise being a huge thing, eating an anti-inflammatory diet keeps him alive. And but he said the 3 things that keep him alive the most are 3 F's: faith, family, and friends.
That's awesome.
And it goes back to that, guys. Relationships are powerful and important. And one of the things he says is, look at the kids that look like they have it all together.
Right.
This is the popular kid in school.
Yep.
The kid who's an athlete, who has tons of friends. He goes, you go up to that kid and you say, "Are you thinking about killing yourself?
Yep.
Do you have the means to do it?"
So many people will not have that conversation. It's
That's
such a
right.
scary conversation to have because number one, it could be weird because so many people culturally we believe it's something that we shouldn't talk about.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? There's a stigma attached to it. You know, both spiritually, there's a stigma attached to it in certain religions.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people wouldn't know what to say if somebody said yes. You know, then what? Nobody's prepared for that.
Right.
So I love that that's one thing that he's doing is educating people on how important it is to open up that dialogue. And if nothing else, we should be opening up that dialogue with our own children. I think that's super important. And, you know, it's nice stories like this. You can utilize those as a parent, not to put your child in the frame of the one who is having those troubles, but like you did with Naveed, is situating it to where you put them in the seat of somebody who can help.
Yeah.
Right. Which then I think covers several things. Right. Because if you have them look at someone who's hurting like that and then how to approach that, they have empathy for that kind of person, which I think then allows them to have empathy for themselves if they ever find themselves
100%.
thinking along those lines.
Look around, guys. You're in public. Look around. I can't say this enough. When you see someone hurting, suffering, that's not your cue to look away or step back or turn
Dig
your
in.
back. You go up to them because no one else will.
Yep, 100%. I think
Go
that's
ask
so
them how they're doing. Tell them you care. Because you do. I know you do. Everybody cared. I know everybody on that bus cared. They didn't know.
Yep.
They didn't know, and they thought it'd be weird because no one else is going. I'm not going to do anything.
Right. What do you say? It reminds me of that show that I forget what network put it on, but it's What Would You Do type of thing where
Yeah.
they would videotape and they would create all of these situations where like somebody is mistreating someone. Would you step in? Somebody
Right.
is getting abused. Would you step in? And it's all actors,
That's right.
you know, perpetrating that.
It's a
And
fake scenario.
It is so alarming how few people
Right.
will actually stand up and do the right thing. It's actually a little bit scary.
Yeah.
So I think we all need to make a concerted effort to be that person. If we all did that, we'd have a lot more people stepping up and a lot fewer social issues that need to be tackled when it comes to
let's
safety.
stop saying mental illness. It's not a mental thing. It's a disease, and it's perfectly okay if you're battling with it. There's no shame. You talk about it. You talk to somebody. Talk to a lot.
But the
talk to
challenge is,
everybody.
let me tell you what part of the challenge is, I think, from a person who may be struggling with that is what does our society do? We want to lock you up. We want to medicate you. Do you know what I mean? And we don't really want to talk about it as a society. And I think that's part of the issue is sometimes, I mean, there could be other causes for it too, right? I think there's a spiritual side. We don't have to dig into that now, but I think there can be other reasons why somebody is having challenges like that. And so, it's a tough one.
Church is a good place, guys.
For sure.
Church is a good place. So let's talk about some myths. What do you think?
Yeah.
This is, and I think that'd be a good way to close. Is the myth is that some people think that low intelligence people have mental health issues or issues like this, and it's not. Intelligence, income, and social status have nothing to do with it.
Absolutely not.
Another myth is that teenagers do not have mental health issues. They have changes in their mood due to their fluctuating hormones. They do have fluctuating hormones, but this is different. It says while teenagers may often have mood changes, it does not mean they do not have mental health conditions. Half of all mental health conditions begin by the age of 14.
Wow. And we do know, certain things like nutrition, nutritional deficiencies, lack of activity are going to exacerbate anything that's underlying. So we really need to make sure, number one, that thank goodness now we have somebody in charge of Health and Human Services that is actually putting putting their money where their mouth is, and they're actually doing something to ensure that some of these things that are contributing that are in our food, like our food dyes, like, some of the different chemicals that cause endocrine system disruptors that can pass the blood-brain barrier and impact, brain health, that these things are now starting to come to light, and they're saying no more. We need to pull those things out. And how many parents are like, I never knew this. Like, I never knew that these petroleum-based dyes
And see, a lot of
can
people
impact.
would say, and this is one of the myths, is medication for psychiatric medications are harmful. Well, actually, that's not truly a myth. I mean, it would be harmful if someone who doesn't need them takes them. But if you're doing those things first and you need to be on a medication, at least it's not going to be as harmful for you.
Right.
Because you're taking out all the other stuff. Now, some people stay on the terribly harmful things like the food dyes and the sugars and everything else, and then they top it off with the psychiatric medication. That's not the right way to go about it. I don't think it's wrong to be on psychiatric medication if it keeps you alive, as long as you're doing all the other things to keep you healthy. Just like Kevin Hines said, he's on an anti-inflammatory diet. He said when he gets off of it, it gets worse.
Yeah.
And he has to stay on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
People with bipolar disorder are moody, it says. I mean, the truth is bipolar disorder cycles can last from weeks to months and do not change quickly. However, changes in a person's state of emotion may happen quickly. So watch that in friends, family members.
Yeah.
A person with a mental health condition is weak. This is a myth. Such conditions would not affect strong people. What a lie.
Yeah.
What a lie.
We know
it's
that
the strongest people that are hiding some of these things that are dealing with.
And we also know that trauma, especially at young ages, is a huge gateway to some of these psychiatric disorders.
Yeah.
And so we need to be cognizant of that and make sure that we're talking to our children and ensuring that we are putting them in safe places, that we're talking to them. We're not letting them go to places. I think it's much better now probably than it was when we were growing up, where I just had to be home, before the streetlights came on. But nowadays, like you have to be, and I think then you were supposed to be cautious too, because there was still a lot of trauma. But don't let your kids around people you don't know. Don't make sure you know where your kids are. So
here's another myth: bad parenting causes adolescents to have mental health conditions. Well, a lot of parents blame themselves for what's going on.
Well, it's hard not to.
Kevin Hines said that his mom and dad both also have bipolar disorder.
Wow.
So, maybe there is a genetic component to all of it.
Right.
Many adverse experiences and factors may influence a person's mental health and well-being. Relationships with parents and guardians are just one factor. A person living in a supportive, loving home can experience similar mental health disorders to someone living in a home with caregivers who need support to provide a safe environment. Mm-hmm. So, the stats don't show that there's that much of a difference, but it always helps for parents to be supportive and loving, to create an environment where kids can come talk to you no matter what happens, and discuss these things. That's why I watched Kevin Hines' story with our oldest, is so we can discuss that. Now I am hoping that if he ever does have a thought about something like this, he would come to me and say, hey, remember that podcast we watched?
Right.
I'm having those thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can hug him, we can talk to him, support him. And
you have to keep the dialogue open with your kids. You have to be willing to dig into the hard conversations and willing to ask those questions, even if you don't think they're going to answer. I talk about a lot of things, very deep things with Naveed, especially at his age. And I have been floored. There are instances where he's a little bit more, keeps things to his chest,
guarded, reserved.
But for the most part, I'm really surprised at how open he is about talking about things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And me just bringing some of my experiences when I was a kid, it really helps to bridge the gap, and not in a like, hey, when I was a kid, it's like, hey, I struggled with that. And just being really open about some of the struggles you had as a teen really helps kids to be able to connect. I think that's important.
Absolutely.
So.
Well, there you have it.
Yeah.
I think that was good information. I lost it today.
Yeah, I think we spent the last half of our podcast here wiping tears. So sorry you had to let yours dry naturally.
Yeah, and I don't even know this guy, Kevin Hines, that well. I mean, but
it's such a touching story,
though.
though. It really does. We need to be more aware of
To know that
people around us.
one word could have changed the trajectory of what he was doing. Now God's using him in a big way.
Right.
And thankfully his faith is strong, and he gets
Huge.
to share that story. And,
Yeah.
and you know, sometimes we need a sea lion to show up.
Absolutely. You never know who
Keep
he's
us
going to
afloat.
send. Seriously.
Well, if you feel like you're drowning, you know, prayer is a good one. But pray with someone.
Yeah, you
Just
can message
don't-
us. We'll pray.
We'll pray with you. 100%. Well, thanks for joining us. Thanks for making our 100 episodes so wonderful. We're just grateful to be able to do this, and hopefully we can bring you another 100.
Yeah, and we have some changes.
Yep.
We want to mention that real quick.
Sure.
So we are going to be altering our format just a little bit, and you can let us know what you think of it. Nothing is written in stone with us, but we are going to be starting to post 2 episodes a week. They're going to be a little bit shorter. So right now we anticipate our posting will probably be like a Monday, Friday, or a Monday, Thursday. So
We'll let Sean decide that one.
Yep, we're letting him run the decision making on that. But yeah, so they'll be a little bit
Oh, yeah,
shorter.
we thought you wouldn't have to wait a whole week for the next episode to show up. And
Yeah, and maybe we'll try to. You'll be able to listen to a whole podcast on your commute. So we're looking at probably around 20 to 25 minutes for each one, and just trying to bring you some more great content. So
Absolutely.
any articles you want us to cover, any topics that you want us to investigate and dive deeper. If there's a topic we've already done that you'd like us to dive into a little bit more, send us a message. Message Sean. He looks at all those and gets us that information, and we help to
we
to
look at
answer
your
back.
comments on
Yep.
the videos on YouTube and Spotify and LinkedIn, all of those. We try to respond directly. So
Yeah. If you have any
keep in
guests
touch
you
with
want us to interview, we have some guests that we're thinking about for, some upcoming podcasts. So
Yeah, we're going to talk about CBD at some point.
yeah, we are. So yeah, let us know. We'd love to get your
please
feedback.
continue to support us and maybe share, subscribe, tell friends and family about the podcast so we can maybe make a difference in more lives.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.
This podcast is part of the Frederick Podcast Network. Learn more at listenfrederick.com.